Welcome back, game-hers and game-hims, to the game that used to own my soul. Now, I know a while back I said I wouldn't be playing Renegades unless I had a good incentive to do so. So, I'm out. I'm done. Until they can prove that they can change, that there is actually a hope for the future, I won't be coming back. There are other games I want to play, other things I want to spend my time on, so that's what I'm going to do. And by all accounts, Renegades didn't show that incentive, yet I still played. So why is that? Well, it comes down to one very simple answer. I had already paid for it. Back near the tail end of Heresy, we got the reveal for the Edge of Fate and a little teaser for Renegades, along with the ability to begin pre-ordering. I'd pre-ordered the Deluxe Edition, which would give me day one access to both of the expansions upon their respective release dates. Then came the Edge of Fate, and my interest in this franchise was put at an all-time low to the point that I even uninstalled during Ash and Iron. Then came the reveals for Renegades, and to say I was disappointed would be an understatement. It looked, by all definitions, like Star Wars slop. And now here we are, over a month after its release, and what do you know? It was slop. I'm going to level with all of you. I really did not like this expansion, to the point where I don't see myself getting whatever other new expansions come in the distant future, nor do I see myself playing any of the content updates in between releases like Shadow and Order. Whenever that ends up coming out. I've seen plenty of discourse online about whether this expansion aligns with Destiny's identity, and many have weighed in, including some big-name content creators. I've seen many criticize the Star Wars Everest skins we got back in Act 1 of Heresy for being so jarring and not fitting in the world of Destiny. Which, they're correct. They do look like shit when trying to fit into the universe. But then these same people went on to say that Renegades does stay true to Destiny's identity, even while we're running around with blasters and lightsabers, when, no, it doesn't. If I showed you these 4 images and said they were all from the same place, you'd believe me, right? Well, no, because this one isn't. There's no clear identity anymore. Bungie has sacrificed that in place of being like Fortnite, and it didn't pay off. Bungie themselves have said they won't be doing another crossover expansion like this ever again, and it's painfully clear why. Ever since this new saga began, Destiny's been hit with a full-blown identity crisis, and even then the cracks were beginning to show as far back as the Taken King with the introduction of the Eververse, and then Seasons with Forsaken. Kind of funny how 2 of the Destiny is so back expansions introduced things that still plague the game to this very day. The art direction of Destiny has always been one of, if not the biggest reasons it stood out so much in the market. Just look at the director. Seeing all the planets and everything accessible on one screen, each having its own unique look. One of the very few things Lightfall did well was the directory changing over the course of the campaign into its final form as the portal, which we would later use to access the Pale Heart. With the launch of the Edge of Fate, the directory got dulled in color and left behind, everything now being shoved into the portal, furthering the Fortnitification of this once charming game. They even went back to change the coloring of the director to its original state because of the amount of backlash they got for trying to sneak that change in. The portal isn't the first version of this system. Hell, it was conceived as far back as Vanilla D1, but couldn't be made due to the long and well-documented development hell of that game's launch. Now, with Renegades, we have yet another iteration of the portal, in the form of orders. Honestly, there isn't much to go in depth on with orders. They're just another bounty system that gives you bright dust and XP. That's about it. The layout of the portal was universally hated during the Edge of Fate, and now, with Renegades, we have the Lawless Frontier. And to give credit where credit is due, it's a massive upgrade from the Edge of Fate's layout. It's visually nice to look at, and you can actually tell what's relevant rather than everything under the sun being crammed onto one page. Don't get me wrong, I still hate the portal, especially now that Kepler is only accessible via the timeline of all things, rather than the planet directory. Bizarre choice, I know, but it's there. I don't know why, but that's how you access it now. They've even stopped doing the world badges. Has anyone else noticed that? The last one we got was for the Pale Heart. Sure, we keep getting ones for dungeons and raids, but no new world badges. I know it's a minor thing, but I've always loved looking at the cover art designs for each badge, and it just feels like yet another part of the game's soul being peeled away for no good reason. God, I've been so sidetracked, I haven't even started talking about the actual campaign yet. I've seen a lot of people saying that even though Renegades looks and feels like Star Wars, it's still a good Destiny story. No, it isn't. And I'll tell you exactly why. Renegades is a carbon copy of A New Hope, beat for beat, even with some Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens sprinkled in. Here, I'll give you a quick summary of the events of Renegade's story, and you'll see just how blatantly lazy the narrative is. We open on a space chase where a team has stolen vital data, Drifter's ship gets boarded with a hallway shootout, and then he gets frozen in carbonite, stasis. We board the enemy ship to save Drifter from the detention block, go through a trash compactor again, haven't seen one of those in Destiny since Presage. Wilhelm scream a stormtrooper, prison break sequence, lightsaber fight, Bale baby rages at one of his underlings, and that's just the first mission. Run around a cantina, fight on Mars, Venus, and Europa, all in very similar looking locations, mind you. Get a lightsaber Praxic blade, stormtrooper disguises, shut down a shield generator, cut off a hand, trench run, super weapon blows up, Bale goes spinning off into space, Drifter and Aerith kiss, finally, the end. I know I brushed over most of the missions, but let me level with you. They don't matter. The majority of this campaign, with the exception of the first and last missions, take place in the seasonal activity. One of these areas even being a reskin of a lost sector from the EDZ. That is completely unacceptable. You have all this Sony and now Lucasfilm Games money, and you couldn't craft any other spaces to have your story play out in? I understand that Destiny and Bungie as a whole are in the shit right now with staff numbers, but this is the best you could offer? 6 main story missions, one of them being a required run of the new exotic mission, with a 58-step quest running through it? Hang on, Fawn, I hear you say. If there are 58 steps in the campaign quest, why is there only 6 missions? That is an excellent question, my eagle-eared viewer. That is because the majority of the quest steps are running back and forth across the social space, talking to NPCs, with the remaining steps being required runs of the seasonal activity, which is just a very boiled down and less engaging version of Helldivers 2. You'll even have moments where you need to talk to characters at the bar instead of where they're standing, which is like 5 feet away from you. Prime example being Anor, who is literally above the bar, but you need to run past her down to the bar to talk to her some of the time, while others you can enter and talk to her as soon as you see her. It just doesn't make sense. You'll even have hologram calls either in the bar or on the landing pad, and then have to go to the opposite side of the map to continue the conversation elsewhere. It's so dumb. I thought this was an issue we had long left behind, but it seems like I was wrong for having faith that Bungie could learn from their mistakes and take on years of constructive feedback. Another big problem with most of the story being in the seasonal activity is that we don't get many interactions with our main opposing force, the Barrent Imperium. They're barely present in this campaign, and they're supposedly this big new threat. We even got 2 new enemies in the form of the Behemoth Walker and the Praetorians, but they hardly show up. Speaking of barely present, our Ghost doesn't utter a single word during this campaign. He even gets replaced halfway through by Drifter's Ghost Blue when we go to scan stuff, or when we should be pulling out our own Ghost when we open our palm. Now, to give some praise, I really like Blue. She's really fun and has great chemistry with Drifter, and her Boston accent is just superb.
Did it work?
You doorknob! You lousy, awful, stupid, waste-of-light, bottom-feeding leech! The code in here is wicked, real anti-Guardian. And we run the same plan on Bale. I'll be okay. I trust you.
Thanks, Blue.
I'll take shotgun with the Guardian.
Whew. Benching me that quick?
No, you're a ride. We're finishing this together.
Right. Together.
I was worried at first that she was going to have her R2-D2 beeps and bloops the whole time, but I'm glad they went with giving her a voice for the rest of the story. Though, something I noticed when playing through the campaign, Blue looks different between her cutscenes when talking to her at the bar and when talking to her literally anywhere else. Even after fully repairing her. Is it probably an oversight from the devs and a nitpick on my part? Absolutely. Does it reinforce that Bungie doesn't deliver polished products? Most definitely. For a while, there were 4 floating lights in the hangar of the ship we started to end the seasonal activity in. They only recently got fixed, but the fact that they were so obviously out in the open is hilarious to me. Another issue I and many others have encountered is dialogue in orbit being abruptly cut off when loading into literally anything. Don't get me wrong, I like that we can have conversations happen while just sitting in orbit, but a big oversight for Bungie is that they seem to just play at the worst times, namely when loading into a social space or an activity, resulting in whatever conversation was happening to be abruptly cut off, or even the same conversation repeating 20 times. I swear, the number of times I've heard Drifter talk about the Taken and how Aerith can see them moving in the dark when loading into Tharsis Cantina is driving me up the wall. Jumping ahead a bit, the new exotic mission, Fire and Ice, had a final boss encounter so bad that Bungie had to go and remove the main mechanic of the final fight because of how poorly it was implemented and how universally hated that fight became. In the fight, the boss becomes immune at certain points, and you have to jump on these platforms to flip some switches to get certain enemies to spawn so you can take down the boss's shield. The problem being, these platforms disappear the moment you step on them, so there you are being shot at with a Gatling gun while hoping to God the platform doesn't disappear before you fully flip the switch, otherwise you'll have to do it again or die. If you run the mission now, Bungie has changed it so the platforms in that arena don't disappear at all. Like, I'm sorry, but how did this get through playtesting? It was so obnoxiously bad that you needed the community to beg you to change it, when it shouldn't have been an issue to begin with. There's also a splicer shank we get during the campaign that bleeps and bloops, but then for some miraculous reason, he gets a voice post-campaign, and he just acts like C-3PO. Like, the delivery couldn't be more on the nose if they tried. Seriously, go check for yourself. He's just floating next to Spider and you can interact with him. It's painful to listen to. I still hate that we, as a Guardian, rarely speak. Hell, we didn't speak during Edge of Fate, even when being spoken to directly, and now the same problem occurs here too. Not a word is uttered from us during either campaign, even after we're told in Edge of Fate that the 9 orchestrated events so we could be raised by our ghost to begin with, and we would maneuver to where we are now. We are quite literally a hollow shell to get the plot to move for the other characters. There's a bit later on in the campaign where Drifter shoots off Bale's hand with Thorn after Bale stabs him, to which we then pick up said Thorn and open fire on the phalanxes shielding Bale. And we don't kill a single one! We even throw a grenade over them, forcing their shields to be lifted to block the explosion. Shoot them now! They're vulnerable Red Bar enemies! Kill them! We orphan Red Bar dregs every day with our new exotic weapons like it's nothing! Why is this happening? I guess now's as good a time as any to talk about our new villains, Dredgen Bale and Premier Loom. I'll start with Loom since he has the least going on for him, both character-wise and in presence throughout the campaign. Premier Loom is the leader of the Barrent Imperium, the new definitely not an Empire knockoff Cabal faction that we face in this expansion. Second only to Bale. Our first introduction to Loom is in the cutscene on board Drifter's ship. The hull gets boarded, and it's underwhelming to say the least. Loom takes a lot of inspiration from Vader in his appearance, but more from the personality of Tarkin when it comes to commanding his troops. When Loom boards the ship, he looks very stiff. He just doesn't respond to being shot, nor does he have any expressions at all throughout the entire scene. I get the point of the shots bouncing off of him is trying to make him look threatening, but part of that comes from the villain actually having expressions. Even a smirk or something would have gone a long way, but no, we have to get him to stand there like he's about to tell his mum that he threw up in the middle of the night. Loom doesn't appear much in the campaign, only in 2 cutscenes, one of which is only for about 5 seconds, neither of which he does anything significant, while the rest of his appearances are over the radio and only once in person in his boss fight during the final mission, along with scattered direct and indirect influence in the lore tabs. We've actually fought by Loom's side before. He's right there, but he only mentions this once in a blink and you'll miss it line of dialogue during the seasonal activity. If you removed Loom from the campaign, everything would play out the same, just minus a reskinned Thumos boss fight, arena and all. That's how you poorly write a villain for your story. If I can remove them and nothing changes in the story, then you've written not only a bad villain, but a bad character overall. Loom defected from Kaido's Cabal ascendancy, alongside a squad of troops, to build up the Imperium, which is now mainly made up of yet another Cabal clone army. Haven't seen one of those since Final Shape, Lightfall, Season of the Haunted, and Vanilla D2. You'd think Kaido would have something to say about this faction of deserters having advanced tech and causing chaos with the aid of the 9, but no. She makes no appearance outside of vague mentions by other characters, Loom included. Remember when Kaido was on the front lines trying to stop her father both on board the derelict Leviathan and on Neomuna? Remember when she joined us in our final assault against the Witness? Yeah, well apparently this didn't warrant her attention despite the giant space croissant killing an entire outpost's worth of guardians and having the capability of retaking her home world from the Hive. Yep. Definitely no reason for her to get involved at all. Slightly jumping into the discussion about Bale, both Loom and Bale survive the end of this expansion. We beat Loom within an inch of his life, only for him to escape. Bale loses a hand and gets his ship badly damaged and is sent spinning off into space, all while Nightfall Station and Loom's flagship are destroyed. Yet, Bungie is adamant that this isn't a filler expansion, but I don't think they quite understand why it is exactly that. The state of the world is the exact same as it was before the story of this expansion kicked off. There have been no world-changing events, no true consequences, nothing. All that's different now is that we have a knockoff Mos Eisley, yet another recolored Cabal faction to fight, a handful of dead nameless guardians, a one-handed Kylo Ren wannabe and his big Cabal friend running around, and some space debris floating above Earth. Just another day at the office. I suppose we should talk about Bale now? Underutilized doesn't even begin to scratch the surface with Bale. There's so much wasted potential for his character in this story, it's just painful to even think about. Bungie has been going for the angle that Bale is a character who is capable of doing the right thing but goes about it completely wrong.
One of my favorite parts about a lot of villains in Star Wars is that they have just like the capability of making a right choice and then consistently do not make good choices.
Gee, I wonder if I know any companies that this could apply to. Bale is very much a bargain bin Kylo Ren. The writing's on the wall with that. He even has his own crash-out moment, just like the movies. Wow, that's so cool. I'm glad my new villain is repeating the same mistakes as their movie inspiration counterpart, and looks extremely lame now as a result. I can't wait to not feel threatened by any of his actions later on as the story unfolds. Hey, Bale, that's not where a lightsaber's supposed to go, buddy. You could lose an eye like that. Bale. Hey, Bale. What's funny is that in an audio log, Loom threatens to kill Bale for killing the Legionary during his crash out. But he really doesn't sound too upset about Bale chopping apart someone he knew. There's even a lore tab where Bale gets a whole squad killed when Six possesses each of them to talk to Bale. In that lore tab, Loom is screaming at Bale, yet in the audio log, he doesn't sound too bothered. It's inconsistent writing at its finest, and further proves that the lore team is just better than the people writing the actual in-game dialogue, which is such a shame because two villains butting heads while working together is always so interesting to watch unfold in a story. We don't even get to see how Bale gets his lightsaber either, only vaguely reading about it in the lore tabs, but even then we don't get a direct story. At least as far as I can tell. If I'm wrong about that, somebody please tell me, because I would genuinely love to know both where he got it from and how he did the ritual of unmaking with it. I won't lie, Bale's such an interesting concept of a character. Not only is he a Dredgen, which is one of the coolest factions in the Destiny universe, but he's not even a Lightbearer. He's just a regular old schmuck who has a planet inside his head, slowly replacing his body with metal. Bale's real name is Nazir Bazet, and he is the son of the founder of Tex Mechanica, a true Nepo baby. His mother was resurrected as a guardian sometime after his death, and so obviously she doesn't remember who Bale is, which only further fueled his growing resentment towards the Light and Guardians as a whole. Throughout the story, we are introduced to the Syndicates, the Pikers, Tharsis Reformation, and the Totality Division. The Pikers are Elixni atheists, meaning they don't believe in any of the dogma of the houses. The Tharsis Reformation is a breakaway from Maya's collective of free-thinking Vex, who love to gamble, as it turns out, because once they're given free will, their first instinct is to get clothes and commit crimes. They even have sentient explosive units! Wait. The Totality Division is a sub-faction of the Barrett Imperium, run by a Scion, but is secretly working to distance itself from the main Imperium. Also, they have the best drip out of all three syndicates and are superior in every way, and I will fight anyone who says otherwise! Now, this all sounds well and cool, right? Well, none of it actually affects the gameplay loop or any in-game interactions, because they still act the same as the base versions that they're reskinned off of. The Pikers do nothing of interest to expand on their atheism. Tharsis doesn't engage in any interesting activities outside the cantina to demonstrate them experiencing free will, and the Totality Division has all their deep lore about wanting to break off from the Imperium tucked away in lore tabs, namely the dungeon-related lore. The Vanguard has put out bounties on all three syndicate leaders. It would be a real shame if they were all holed up in the same place, only a few feet away from each other. It would be a shame if that place had a Praxic warlock there who is very tight-arsed about the law and hates criminals. It would be a real shame if any of the numerous Guardians who flocked to the outpost snitched the Vanguard, or hell, if one of the Vanguard members knew who was assisting us in our battle against the Imperium, and from where they might be stationed. Speaking of a certain Praxic, let's get into Anor and subsequently Drifter's crew as a whole. Anor sucks. I generally can't stand her as a character in this expansion. If she isn't whining about the Drifter, she's sitting on her high horse preaching about how right she is. Also, she has this stupid headpiece thing, like, girl, take it off. It doesn't suit you at all. Plus, she says this line of dialogue during her duel with Bale, which is just sloppy writing at its finest.
Why do you hate your own kind so much?
What?
Ido is someone whose place in this expansion really confuses me. Like, genuinely, can anyone tell me why she, of all people, is on the crew, and what exactly does she do to contribute to the story? She does the same thing she's always done, whine and complain and cause trouble for everyone else. She pushes for the prophecy that we learned of at the end of The Edge of Fate to be put out to the public, which obviously sowed chaos in the city on top of what was already there, thanks to Bale's actions with Nightfall Station. Yet Ido will then go on to say that she's not like the younger, more naive version of herself we've grown accustomed to since her introduction. Okay, cool. That's great that you want to be mature. Now, can you please show us that? Drifter and Eris continue to have great chemistry, and they finally kiss on screen! Surprisingly enough, Ikora and Crow are nowhere to be found in this expansion. Zavala shows up roughly halfway through, but doesn't do much other than pat us on the back for doing what we always do. Again, remove Zavala and nothing about the story changes one bit. Ever since 3 died in Edge of Fate, we've been told both in dialogue and through the lore tabs that the Earth is changing. Raining blood, mountains melting, etc. Cool. Can we see it?
No.
Stop telling us about things. Start to show us all these cool world-changing moments. We get a very, very brief glimpse of the current state of Earth from space during the cutscene where Nightfall Station blows up. And honestly, I thought that was Venus for a solid minute, just because of how similar they look. Also, Venus was apparently taken at some point, I guess at the same time as Titan, Mercury, Mars, and Io, but like, why? Venus had no significance like those other 4 locations. We were never told about it before either. My assumption as to why we had never gone back post-D1 was that the Vanguard stopped sanctioning missions there, similar to what happened canonically with the Cosmodrome after the Siva crisis. There's a Praxic temple on both Venus and Europa, both located in Darkness temples. Why is that? Honor makes it painfully clear that the Praxic Order hates the darkness, so why build not one, but 2 temples, both in darkness structures? Just seems like a bizarre choice in universe to me. This campaign was just so disappointing to me. You could really tell how uninspired it was. Hell, even the music, one of the usually big standouts in any Destiny-related thing, felt so generic. I cannot name a single track that stood out to me. Ironically, the track that played during the trash compactor sequence in the opening mission was more memorable. And that track was released back in 2019 with Shadowkeep. The game just isn't challenging anymore. I did the campaign on Legendary, and it was an absolute pushover. Even the trench run at the end, while cool visually, was just not threatening in the slightest. There was not a single moment where I felt like I had to lock in. Not once. Not to mention the constant shower of loot we get now. It took me under a week to get all 3 of my characters up to 550 power, the current power cap you can hit, and complete the campaign on normal with my Hunter and Titan. Blasters and the Praxic Blade are at an interesting spot for me. On one hand, I really like the feel of the Praxic Blade, but on the other, I just don't dig the blasters. I'm not sure what it is about them, but I just prefer using literally any of the other gun archetypes over them. Also, fuck the Hypernova Bane. That shit is such a pain in the ass to deal with, especially when you're the only one in your fire team trying to kill it. Not only does the baned enemy regain health as it enters Hypernova mode, but it becomes a bullet sponge and a half and seems to only kill me no matter how far away I get. My teammate can stand next to it and tank the blast, while I'll be on a different planet and still get nuked. That was a lot. I know. But I've had this on my chest for a while, and I'm just so tired of it. I really wouldn't have bothered with this expansion had I not already bought it way back when. It was so painfully clearly not worth my time or money. As I said before, I don't think I'm going to buy any further expansions for this game. I've not even done the dungeon because none of my friends play this game anymore, and I dare not touch the hellscape that is the LFG. From what I've seen though, it looks piss easy, and the bosses are just a reskinned gladiator and a hive lightbearer wizard. Before I go, I'll just leave you all with one question. Where is Dave Samuel? Is he safe? Is he alright? It seems in your anger, you got him fired. I couldn't. He was still emoting, I felt it.